3 weeks after the desert engagement, Rodriguez sat in a sterile briefing room at the forward operating base, reviewing intelligence reports that had fundamentally changed their understanding of what they had encountered in those deadly dunes. The enemy sniper they had faced wasn't just any professional soldier, but a former member of an elite foreign special forces unit with extensive training in asymmetric warfare. The evidence Williams had collected from the abandoned positions told a disturbing story of sophisticated planning and foreign support for anti-American operations in the region. Weapons serial numbers traced back to state-level suppliers, while communication equipment bore markings that indicated military-grade technology rather than commercially available gear. Sullivan had been awarded a Bronze Star for his marksmanship during the engagement, particularly the final shot that eliminated the enemy sniper at extreme range under combat conditions. The citation noted his critical role in protecting his team and enabling their successful extraction, though Sullivan himself remained characteristically modest about his contribution. Chen's technical analysis of the enemy communication intercepts revealed a network of foreign advisors providing training and equipment to local insurgent forces. The sophistication of their electronic warfare capabilities had been previously unknown to American intelligence, making Chen's observations crucial for future operations in the region. Williams, despite being the youngest team member, had been selected for advanced training in intelligence collection techniques based on his performance during the engagement. His methodical approach to evidence gathering and his ability to maintain composure under extreme pressure had impressed his superiors and opened new career opportunities within the special operations community. The debriefing sessions had revealed that the team's original mission had been compromised from the beginning. A security breach at the forward operating base had provided enemy forces with advanced knowledge of American patrol routes and timing, enabling them to prepare the elaborate ambush that nearly cost 4 lives. Rodriguez found himself questioning everything about operational security protocols after learning about the intelligence leak. The professional sniper who had initiated the engagement had been positioned for days before the SEAL team even departed their base, suggesting a level of preparation that should have been impossible without inside information. The investigation into the security breach had uncovered a network of local contractors with access to sensitive mission planning information. Several individuals had been detained, but Rodriguez suspected the damage went deeper than anyone wanted to admit. Trust, once broken in combat operations, was nearly impossible to rebuild completely. Sullivan spent his recovery time reviewing the engagement from a tactical perspective, analyzing what they had done right and what could be improved for future operations. His experience as a sniper gave him unique insights into the mindset and capabilities of the enemy marksmen they had faced in the desert. The ballistic analysis of the enemy sniper's rifle revealed modifications and ammunition that confirmed foreign military support at the highest levels. The weapon system was worth more than most insurgent groups could afford, and the specialized ammunition was available only through state-level suppliers with strict export controls. Chen's communication analysis had identified at least 12 different enemy positions during the engagement, far more than the team had realized while under fire. The enemy's use of coordinated radio procedures and tactical frequencies demonstrated training that went beyond anything previously encountered in the region. Williams had been promoted to sergeant based on his performance during the engagement, though he continued to struggle with the psychological aftermath of killing another human being. The enemy sniper he had helped locate was someone's son, possibly someone's father, and that reality weighed heavily on his conscience despite the tactical necessity. The Apache helicopter crew that had provided crucial support during the extraction had been credited with destroying 7 enemy vehicles and dispersing a force of at least 30 individuals. Their rapid response and accurate fire had turned certain defeat into tactical victory, demonstrating the importance of air support in modern warfare. Rodriguez learned that the high-value target they had originally been sent to locate was actually the foreign advisor who had been training the enemy sniper and his support team. Intelligence suggested he had escaped during the confusion of the helicopter attack, crossing into Pakistan before American forces could intercept him. The operational lessons learned from the engagement resulted in significant changes to patrol procedures and mission planning protocols throughout the region. Rodriguez's detailed after-action report became required reading for special operations units deploying to similar environments, helping other teams avoid the tactical surprises his unit had encountered. Sullivan's marksmanship skills had been tested by some of the best shooters in the American military, and he consistently demonstrated the ability to make accurate shots at ranges that most soldiers would consider impossible. His final shot during the desert engagement had been at a range of 847 meters, using iron sights in challenging wind conditions. Chen received orders for reassignment to a specialized electronic warfare unit, where his experience with enemy communication systems would be invaluable for developing countermeasures. His ability to monitor and analyze enemy transmissions under combat conditions had provided insights that intelligence professionals found extremely valuable. Williams struggled with nightmares for months after the engagement, requiring counseling and support from military mental health professionals. The transition from training scenarios to actual combat killing was something that no amount of preparation could fully address, and his psychological recovery became a priority for his unit's leadership. The desert where they had faced death together was declared off limits to routine patrols after intelligence revealed it had been used as a training ground for enemy forces for several months. The elaborate preparation and professional execution of the ambush demonstrated capabilities that required fundamental reassessment of enemy tactics in the region. Rodriguez was promoted to Master Sergeant and given command of a larger special operations unit, with responsibility for implementing the tactical innovations that had emerged from their desert engagement. His leadership under extreme pressure had demonstrated the qualities necessary for greater responsibility and more complex missions. The foreign sniper's equipment, recovered after the engagement, revealed training manuals and tactical procedures that matched those used by elite military units from several different countries. This suggested a coordinated international effort to provide advanced training to anti-American forces, rather than isolated support from a single nation. Sullivan eventually retired from active duty and became an instructor at the military's premier sniper school, where he taught advanced marksmanship techniques to the next generation of American special operations personnel. His experience facing a professional peer competitor in actual combat provided invaluable insights for training programs. Chen's intelligence analysis contributed to the identification and disruption of several other enemy training camps throughout the region. The communication patterns and tactical procedures he had observed during their engagement provided a template for recognizing similar operations before they could threaten American forces. Williams completed his enlistment and used his military training to become a federal law enforcement officer, specializing in counterterrorism operations. The skills and psychological resilience he had developed during his special operations service translated well to domestic security challenges. Rodriguez often returned to the desert in his memory, replaying the tactical decisions that had kept his team alive against overwhelming odds. The experience had changed all four men in ways that would influence the rest of their lives, creating bonds forged in combat that would endure long after their military service ended. The sniper who had emerged from the dunes that morning had tested them in ways that training could never fully replicate. They had faced a professional equal and survived through teamwork, training, and the kind of courage that defines America's special operations forces. Their story became part of the unofficial history that experienced soldiers share with those who follow, ensuring that hard-won lessons are never forgotten. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Williams, while scanning the northern approach through his rifle scope, noticed something that didn't fit the tactical pattern they had been observing. One of the enemy positions showed signs of internal disagreement, with individuals gesturing animatedly and pointing in different directions. Rodriguez studied the distant figures through his binoculars, noting the body language that suggested tension within the enemy ranks. Professional military units rarely displayed such obvious discord during active operations, which meant they might be dealing with forces of mixed training and motivation rather than a completely unified threat. Chen's radio suddenly crackled with clear American voices. A helicopter support team was approaching from the southeast and requesting target identification. The cavalry was finally arriving, though Rodriguez knew that helicopter support alone might not be sufficient against the forces they were facing. Sullivan immediately began preparing target data for the incoming aircraft, using his scope to identify priority targets among the enemy positions. The heavy machine gun emplacement was his first priority, followed by vehicle positions that could provide rapid reinforcement or extraction for enemy forces. The sound of approaching helicopters grew steadily louder, and Rodriguez could see the enemy forces beginning to react to this new development. Several of the vehicle positions started engines and began moving, probably attempting to disperse before they could be engaged by American air power. Williams reported that the internal disagreement in the northern position was escalating, with some individuals appearing to withdraw from their positions entirely. Rodriguez realized they might be witnessing the collapse of a hastily assembled force that lacked the cohesion necessary for sustained combat operations. The first helicopter appeared over the eastern ridge, a AH-64 Apache gunship that immediately began broadcasting warnings in multiple languages for all armed personnel to disperse. The psychological effect on enemy forces was immediate and dramatic, with several positions beginning to show signs of withdrawal. Chen established direct communication with the Apache crew, providing target coordinates and tactical assessment of the situation. The helicopter pilots acknowledged his transmission and began their attack run on the heavy machine gun position that had been threatening the SEAL team. Sullivan watched through his scope as the Apache's 30mm cannon spoke with devastating authority, turning the machine gun emplacement into a cloud of dust and debris. The enemy crew never had a chance to respond, caught completely exposed on the ridge they had thought provided tactical advantage. The destruction of their heavy weapons position caused a visible panic among the remaining enemy forces. Rodriguez could see individuals abandoning their positions and running toward vehicles, their previous tactical discipline replaced by the universal human desire to escape overwhelming firepower. Williams counted at least 3 vehicles departing the area at high speed, leaving dust clouds that marked their retreat toward the Pakistani border. The remaining enemy positions seemed to be losing coordination rapidly, with some fighters attempting to withdraw while others maintained their positions uncertainly. Rodriguez made the tactical decision to exploit the enemy's confusion by breaking out of their defensive position. With helicopter support overhead and enemy forces in disarray, this represented their best opportunity to regain tactical initiative and complete extraction to safety. The team moved with practiced efficiency, using bounds and covering fire to advance toward a landing zone that Chen had coordinated with the Apache crew. Sullivan provided overwatch while Rodriguez led Williams and Chen across the open ground toward their extraction point. The Apache continued to engage targets of opportunity, its crew using superior optics and firepower to hunt down fleeing enemy forces. Rodriguez could hear the pilot's reports over Chen's radio, describing the destruction of several vehicles and the dispersion of remaining ground forces. As they approached the landing zone, Rodriguez reflected on how quickly the tactical situation had changed once American air support arrived. The enemy forces that had seemed so professional and coordinated had collapsed rapidly when faced with capabilities they couldn't match or counter effectively. Williams spotted movement in a nearby wadi that turned out to be the original sniper who had initiated the engagement hours earlier. The individual was attempting to extract on foot, carrying what appeared to be a sophisticated rifle system and wearing equipment that confirmed foreign military origins. Sullivan took careful aim at the fleeing sniper, measuring wind and distance for what could be the shot that ended this engagement decisively. The range was at the extreme limit of his capabilities, but the target was moving predictably across open ground with limited cover available. The shot was perfect, striking the sniper center mass and ending the threat that had initiated this entire engagement. Rodriguez felt a mixture of satisfaction and regret as he watched the figure fall, understanding that they had likely eliminated someone with training and experience, similar to their own. Chen's radio confirmed that additional American helicopters were inbound to provide extraction, support, and security for the area. The immediate tactical situation was resolved, but Rodriguez knew that intelligence personnel would want detailed debriefings about the sophisticated enemy forces they had encountered. Williams began collecting evidence from abandoned enemy positions, including weapons, communication equipment, and personal items that might provide intelligence about the organization and support structure behind this operation. His thoroughness reflected training that emphasized intelligence gathering as a crucial component of special operations. Sullivan maintained security while the rest of the team prepared for extraction, his rifle covering potential approach routes and his experience keeping him alert for last-minute threats. Professional soldiers never assumed an engagement was truly over until they were safely back at base. The sound of approaching UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters provided final confirmation that their ordeal was ending successfully. Rodriguez felt the tension leaving his shoulders as he realized all 4 team members would be returning home alive despite facing overwhelming odds and sophisticated opposition. Chen established communication with the extraction helicopters, providing landing zone information and confirming that American forces controlled the immediate area. The professional efficiency of the helicopter crews reflected the same training standards that had enabled the SEAL team to survive this engagement. Rodriguez gathered his team for final equipment checks before extraction, ensuring that sensitive items were properly secured and that no American equipment would be left behind for enemy exploitation. His attention to detail reflected years of experience in hostile territory where small oversights could have strategic consequences. The Black Hawk settled onto the makeshift landing zone with practiced precision, its crew chief immediately establishing security while the SEALs boarded rapidly. Rodriguez was the last man on board, maintaining responsibility for his team's safety until the aircraft lifted off and began the flight back to base. As the helicopter gained altitude, Rodriguez looked back at the desert valley where they had spent the most intense hours of their military careers. The landscape looked peaceful from the air, giving no indication of the deadly game of hide-and-seek that had played out among the dunes and rocks below. The vehicle tracks Rodriguez and Chen discovered told a story that made their tactical situation much more dangerous. Multiple vehicles had used this area recently, based on the overlapping tire patterns in the sand. More concerning was the evidence of heavy equipment being unloaded, including what appeared to be ammunition crates and communication gear. Rodriguez studied the tracks with the practiced eye of someone who had spent years reading terrain for signs of enemy activity. The depth and spacing of the tire marks suggested at least 3 vehicles, possibly more. The organized way equipment had been distributed indicated military level planning and logistics rather than random insurgent activity. Chen established their new position behind a cluster of large rocks that provided good cover and observation of their back trail. His radio immediately picked up increased enemy communications, with multiple voices now participating in what sounded like coordinated tactical discussions. The enemy knew exactly where the SEALs were and was planning accordingly. Through his earpiece, Rodriguez heard Sullivan reporting that the flanking force he had spotted earlier was now moving more aggressively toward their original position. Williams confirmed seeing at least 4 individuals with military-style weapons and equipment, moving with the kind of coordination that suggested professional training and frequent practice together. The sound of engines starting in the distance confirmed Rodriguez's worst fears. The enemy possessed vehicular support, which meant they could rapidly reposition forces or bring additional firepower to bear. Against foot-mobile American forces, vehicles represented a significant tactical advantage in this terrain. Sullivan and Williams began their own movement toward the rally point, using the covering fire techniques that had been drilled into them through countless training exercises. Sullivan's rifle continued to speak at measured intervals, each shot carefully aimed to keep enemy heads down, while Williams bounded forward between pieces of cover. The enemy sniper proved his professionalism by not rising to the bait of Sullivan's covering fire. Instead of returning fire immediately and revealing his exact position, he waited for cleaner shots at the moving Americans. This patience marked him as someone with serious military training rather than an enthusiastic amateur. Rodriguez watched through his binoculars as dust clouds began appearing on multiple horizons. Around their position, the vehicles were moving to establish a cordon around the SEALs, using superior mobility to compensate for the Americans' advantages in training and equipment. It was a classic tactic that showed sophisticated understanding of small unit operations. Chen's radio crackled with an emergency transmission from their forward operating base. Intelligence sources had identified the enemy force as a specialized unit, with connections to foreign military advisors. This explained the professional tactics and equipment they were encountering, but also meant the SEALs were facing opponents with training comparable to their own. Williams reached the rally point first, breathing heavily but maintaining his weapon in ready position. His youth showed in his rapid recovery from the sprint across open ground, but his tactical awareness remained sharp as he immediately began scanning for threats from new directions. Sullivan arrived at the rally point 30 seconds later, his older legs feeling the effects of the desert heat and sustained movement under combat conditions. Despite his fatigue, his first action was to establish fields of fire that would cover their most likely avenues of enemy approach. Rodriguez gathered his team for a rapid tactical assessment of their situation. They were surrounded by numerically superior forces with vehicular support and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Their ammunition was adequate for a sustained firefight, but they lacked the heavy weapons necessary to engage vehicles effectively. The sound of helicopters in the distance brought a moment of hope. Until Chen's radio delivered crushing news, the approaching aircraft were enemy helicopters, not American support. The tactical situation had just shifted from difficult to potentially impossible, with the SEALs now facing air support in addition to ground forces. Rodriguez made the hardest decision of his military career. Instead of attempting to fight their way out against overwhelming odds, they would go to ground and wait for an opportunity to extract. It meant abandoning their original mission, but keeping his men alive had to take priority over any intelligence objectives. The team found a defensive position in a small depression surrounded by large rocks that would provide some protection from both ground fire and aerial observation. It wasn't perfect, but it offered their best chance of surviving until American support could arrive, or the tactical situation changed in their favor. Chen established communication with their base and transmitted their GPS coordinates along with a detailed assessment of enemy forces. Command acknowledged their transmission and confirmed that helicopter support was being expedited, but estimated arrival time was still at least 20 minutes away. Williams distributed ammunition to ensure each team member had an equal share, understanding that sustained fire discipline would be crucial to their survival. His methodical approach to logistics reflected training that emphasized preparation over heroics, planning over improvisation. Sullivan positioned himself where he could observe the greatest number of potential approach routes while maintaining covered positions for the rest of the team. His experience with defensive operations made him invaluable in situations like this, where patience and accurate fire would matter more than aggressive movement. The first enemy probe came from the north, with two individuals attempting to close within effective small arms range of the SEAL position. Sullivan's rifle spoke twice, and the probe was withdrawn immediately. The enemy's rapid retreat suggested they were testing American defensive capabilities, rather than attempting a serious assault. Rodriguez recognized the probing action as part of a larger tactical plan designed to fix his team in position, while other forces maneuvered for advantage. Professional military units rarely made frontal assaults when they possessed numerical superiority and time to plan more sophisticated approaches. Chen's radio picked up transmissions, indicating that the enemy was calling for additional support from somewhere beyond the immediate area. The implications were troubling. This operation was significant enough to warrant reinforcement, suggesting the SEALs had stumbled into something much larger than their original intelligence had indicated. The sound of vehicle engines grew closer from multiple directions, confirming that the enemy was establishing a complete cordon around their position. Rodriguez counted at least 6 different engine signatures, indicating a force much larger than a typical patrol or even a reinforced squad. Williams spotted movement on a distant ridge that made his blood run cold, the unmistakable outline of a heavy machine gun being positioned to cover the valley where they were trapped. The weapon's range and firepower would make movement in any direction extremely dangerous, effectively completing their entrapment. Sullivan confirmed Williams's observation through his rifle scope, noting that the machine gun crew was positioning their weapon with obvious professional competence. They understood fields of fire, dead space, and interlocking fires in ways that suggested formal military training rather than insurgent experience. Rodriguez realized they were facing a coordinated operation planned by someone with intimate knowledge of American special operations tactics. The enemy's use of probing attacks, vehicle cordons, and supporting weapons followed textbook principles for containing and destroying small special operations units. Chen's attempts to establish communication with higher headquarters were being jammed by sophisticated electronic warfare equipment. The enemy possessed capabilities that went far beyond typical insurgent operations, suggesting state-level support or involvement of foreign military advisors. The desert sun reached its zenith, turning their rocky shelter into an oven that tested everyone's endurance and decision-making capabilities. Rodriguez knew that heat exhaustion would become a factor within hours, adding another element to an already complex tactical equation that seemed to offer no easy solutions. Rodriguez and Chen had covered nearly 200 meters of their flanking movement when the second shot rang out. This time, the bullet struck the sand less than 3 feet from Chen's position, sending up a small spray of debris that left no doubt about the sniper's deadly intentions. The shot's accuracy at that range demonstrated professional-level marksmanship that demanded immediate respect. Chen rolled behind the nearest cover, a weathered boulder that had probably been sitting in this desert for thousands of years. Rodriguez joined him seconds later, both men breathing heavily from the combination of physical exertion and adrenaline. The sniper had revealed his approximate position with that shot, but had also demonstrated that he could hit targets at considerable range. Through his earpiece, Rodriguez heard Sullivan's voice reporting that he had observed the muzzle flash from the rocky outcrop Williams had spotted earlier. The distance measurement confirmed Rodriguez's fears. They were dealing with someone capable of accurate fire at ranges exceeding 500 meters. Very few fighters possessed that level of skill. Williams, still in position with Sullivan, reported movement near the sniper's location through his scope. He could make out what appeared to be at least 2 individuals, though the heat shimmer and distance made positive identification impossible. This meant the SEALs were potentially outnumbered and definitely outgunned in terms of positional advantage. Rodriguez found himself facing the kind of tactical puzzle that separated experienced leaders from those who simply wore the rank. Every option carried significant risk, but maintaining their current position was essentially a death sentence. The sniper had demonstrated both the skill and equipment necessary to pick them off one by one if they remained static. Chen's radio equipment picked up another burst of transmission in the local dialect, stronger this time and lasting several seconds. While none of the SEALs spoke the language fluently, Chen's basic training allowed him to recognize certain military terms. The enemy was definitely coordinating with additional forces, though their exact numbers and positions remained unknown. The landscape around their position offered limited cover for a direct assault on the sniper's nest. The rocky outcrop sat atop a natural rise that provided excellent observation and fields of fire in all directions. Approaching from any angle would require crossing at least 100 meters of open ground under direct observation from above. Sullivan's voice crackled through their communications again, reporting that he had identified what appeared to be prepared fighting positions around the main outcrop. The enemy had spent considerable time preparing this location, suggesting either advance intelligence about American patrol routes or simply professional paranoia about potential threats. Rodriguez realized they were likely facing a deliberate ambush rather than a chance encounter. The location, timing, and level of preparation all pointed toward someone who had known American forces would be operating in this area. The implications made his stomach tighten with concern about operational security back at their base. Williams suddenly reported seeing smoke rising from behind the outcrop, thin and gray against the desert sky. It could indicate anything from a signal fire to cooking activities, but suggested that the enemy forces were established enough to maintain some kind of base camp. Professional fighters didn't usually advertise their positions with smoke unless they felt very confident about their tactical situation. Chen managed to establish brief contact with their forward operating base, reporting their situation in coded language that wouldn't reveal sensitive information if intercepted. Command acknowledged their transmission and promised helicopter support within 45 minutes. But Rodriguez knew that timeline might be too late if the enemy decided to press their current advantage. The sun continued its relentless climb, turning the desert into an oven that tested everyone's endurance equally. Rodriguez had learned to use environmental factors as tactical advantages, understanding that heat affected decision-making and physical performance in predictable ways. Professional soldiers trained to operate in extreme conditions, but even the best preparation had limits. Sullivan reported detecting movement on their right flank, approximately 800 meters away. Through his scope, he could make out what appeared to be two individuals moving with obvious military discipline between cover positions. The enemy was attempting to establish a crossfire situation, positioning forces to catch the SEALs between multiple fields of fire. Rodriguez made a command decision that would either save his team or doom them all. Instead of waiting for helicopter support that might arrive too late, they would attempt to break contact and extract to a more defensible position. The key was coordinated movement that would prevent the enemy from maintaining effective observation on all team members simultaneously. The extraction plan required precise timing and absolute trust between team members. Sullivan and Williams would provide suppressive fire on the main sniper position, while Rodriguez and Chen moved to a rally point 300 meters to the south. Once Rodriguez and Chen were in position, they would return fire while Sullivan and Williams bounded to join them. Chen packed his radio equipment with practiced efficiency, ensuring he could maintain communications during movement while keeping his hands free for his weapon. His grandfather had been a radio operator during the Korean War, and Chen had grown up hearing stories about the importance of communications in combat operations. Williams checked his ammunition count and weapon condition one final time before the extraction began. Despite his relative youth, he had developed the kind of methodical pre-combat routine that marked professional soldiers. His movements were economical and purposeful, wasting no energy on unnecessary actions. Sullivan selected his targets carefully, focusing on the main sniper position while keeping awareness of the flanking movement they had detected earlier. His role would be crucial during the extraction, providing accurate covering fire that would force the enemy to keep their heads down while his teammates moved to safety. Rodriguez gave the signal to begin, and Sullivan's rifle spoke with authority across the desert valley. His first shot struck the rocky outcrop near the suspected sniper position, sending fragments of stone flying and establishing that the SEALs possessed their own long-range capabilities. Williams added his fire to the barrage, creating a sustained volume that made precise return fire difficult. Under cover of Sullivan's marksmanship, Rodriguez and Chen began their movement toward the rally point. They used every available piece of cover, moving in short bounds that minimized their exposure to enemy observation. The desert that had seemed so empty earlier now felt alive with potential threats from multiple directions. The enemy sniper responded to Sullivan's fire with a shot that passed close enough to Williams that he could hear the bullet's passage through the air. The return fire confirmed both the sniper's position and his continued effectiveness despite the suppressive fire being directed at his location. Chen's radio crackled with an update from command. Helicopter support was being delayed due to mechanical issues, but ground forces were being repositioned to provide assistance. Rodriguez acknowledged the transmission while continuing his movement, though he suspected ground forces would arrive too late to affect the immediate tactical situation. As Rodriguez and Chen approached their rally point, they discovered evidence that made the tactical situation even more complex. Fresh vehicle tracks and equipment that suggested a much larger enemy presence than they had initially estimated. They were potentially facing a well-equipped and numerically superior force with intimate knowledge of the local terrain. Rodriguez made his decision with the cold calculation that had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments. They would continue the mission, but with modifications. Instead of following their original route toward the suspected target location, they would circle around and try to identify the sniper's position from an unexpected angle. He gathered his team close and explained the plan in whispered fragments. Sullivan would take point again, but this time they would move in a wide arc to the east using the natural contours of the landscape to mask their movement. Chen would monitor radio traffic for any enemy communications, while Williams would watch their back trail for signs of pursuit. The sun climbed higher as they began their careful advance, turning the desert into a furnace that tested their endurance with every step. Rodriguez had learned to embrace the heat during his years of desert combat, understanding that it affected everyone equally. The difference was in mental preparation and physical conditioning, areas where American Special Forces held distinct advantages. As they moved through a narrow canyon between 2 large dunes, Sullivan suddenly froze and raised his fist. Rodriguez immediately signaled the others to stop and take cover. Sullivan had spotted something that made his veteran instinct scream danger, though he couldn't immediately identify what had triggered his alarm. For several long minutes, The team remained motionless while Sullivan studied the terrain ahead through his rifle scope. Finally, he spotted what had caught his attention. A thin wire stretched across the canyon at ankle height, nearly invisible against the sandy background. It was a tripwire, professionally installed and carefully concealed. Rodriguez felt a mixture of admiration and concern as he studied the obstacle. Whoever they were facing possessed serious military training and enough confidence to set up elaborate traps. This wasn't some random insurgent taking potshots at American forces. They were dealing with a professional, possibly someone with special forces background similar to their own. Chen carefully examined the wire using a small mirror to avoid exposing himself to potential observation. He discovered that it was connected to what appeared to be a homemade explosive device hidden among the rocks. The bomb was sophisticated enough to kill or seriously wound anyone who triggered it, but crude enough to suggest local manufacturing rather than military-grade ordnance. Williams volunteered to disarm the device, having received extensive training in explosive ordnance disposal during his time with the SEALs. Rodriguez agreed, but insisted on establishing security while Williams worked. Sullivan positioned himself to cover the approach they had just taken, while Rodriguez watched the path ahead for any signs of movement. The disarming process took 15 nerve-wracking minutes. Williams worked with steady hands despite the sweat streaming down his face, carefully tracing each wire to ensure he understood the device's construction before attempting to neutralize it. One wrong move could not only kill him, but alert their enemy to the team's exact location. When Williams finally gave the all-clear signal, Rodriguez felt a small measure of relief. They had overcome one obstacle, but he suspected it was only the first of many. Professional snipers rarely relied on single tactics, preferring to create multiple layers of challenge for their targets. The team continued through the canyon, moving even more carefully now that they understood the level of preparation their enemy had invested in this operation. Rodriguez found himself wondering how long the sniper had been planning this encounter, and whether their mission briefing had been compromised somehow. As they emerged from the canyon, the landscape opened into a broader valley with better visibility in all directions. Rodriguez immediately felt more comfortable with the tactical situation, though he knew that improved visibility worked both ways. If they could see potential threats more easily, those same threats could also spot the SEAL team from greater distances. Sullivan detected movement on their left flank, approximately 400 meters away. Through his scope, he could make out what appeared to be a single individual moving between cover positions with obvious military training. The person moved with purpose and discipline, suggesting this wasn't some random encounter with local civilians. Rodriguez studied the distant figure through his own binoculars, noting the professional way the individual used available cover and moved with obvious awareness of proper tactical spacing. This confirmed his growing suspicion that they were facing someone with serious military background, possibly even special forces training. Chen reported picking up fragmentary radio transmissions in what sounded like a local dialect, though the signal was too weak and distorted to make out specific words. The fact that their opponent was using radio communication suggested either backup forces in the area, or at minimum, someone monitoring the situation from a remote location. The team found themselves in an increasingly complex tactical situation. They were outnumbered by an unknown margin, facing an opponent with professional training and intimate knowledge of the local terrain. Their original mission parameters no longer seemed adequate for the realities they were confronting. Rodriguez considered calling for backup, but knew that helicopter support was at least 30 minutes away, and ground forces would take much longer to reach their position. In a sniper duel, 30 minutes might as well be 30 hours. They would have to resolve this situation using only their own skills and equipment. Williams spotted something that changed everything. A glint of metal from a rocky outcrop about 600 meters to their north. It was brief, lasting only a fraction of a second, but unmistakably the reflection of sunlight off a rifle scope or binocular lens. For the first time since the initial shot, they had a potential fix on their opponent's location. Sullivan immediately trained his own scope on the area Williams had identified, but saw nothing definitive. The range was at the extreme limit of effective rifle fire, even for someone with his marksmanship skills. More importantly, they couldn't be certain whether the glint represented their original sniper or additional enemy forces. Rodriguez made another tactical decision that would prove crucial to their survival. Instead of attempting to engage at extreme range with uncertain target identification, they would use their superior mobility and training to close the distance. If they could get within 300 meters, Sullivan's marksmanship skills would give them a significant advantage. The plan required splitting the team, something Rodriguez normally avoided in hostile territory. Sullivan and Williams would provide covering fire from their current position, while Rodriguez and Chen made a flanking movement to get closer to the suspected sniper position. It was risky, but offered their best chance of taking control of the tactical situation. As Rodriguez and Chen began their movement, the desert around them seemed to hold its breath once again. Every step carried the possibility of walking into crosshairs. Every piece of cover might conceal another explosive device. The psychological pressure of operating under potential sniper observation tested their mental discipline as much as their physical skills. Chen's radio suddenly crackled with an unexpected transmission from their base. Command was reporting unusual activity in their area and requesting immediate status update. Rodriguez realized that other intelligence sources had detected the enemy presence, which meant the situation was escalating beyond their small unit engagement. The desert wind carried more than just sand that morning. It carried the scent of danger, though the 4 Navy SEALs moving through the Afghan wasteland couldn't quite place what felt wrong. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez led the patrol, his weathered face scanning the endless dunes that stretched toward the Pakistani border. Behind him, Petty Officer Jake Sullivan kept his rifle ready, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the early hour. The mission had seemed straightforward when briefed back at the forward operating base. Intelligence suggested a high-value target was moving through this corridor, possibly carrying information about planned attacks on American forces. The team's job was simple: locate, observe, and report. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. Rodriguez had been doing this for 8 years, long enough to trust his instincts. Something about this morning felt different. The usual sounds of the desert seemed muted, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Even the local wildlife had gone silent, which in his experience meant only one thing: someone else was out here. The team had been walking for 3 hours since leaving their insertion point. The terrain was brutal, with shifting sand that made every step uncertain and rocky outcrops that could hide anything from scorpions to enemy fighters. Specialist Tommy Chen, their communications expert, struggled with the heavy radio equipment in the heat. Corporal Danny Williams, the youngest member of their unit, kept checking his weapon nervously. As they crested a particularly steep dune, Rodriguez held up his fist, signaling the team to stop. Below them lay a small valley dotted with scrub brush and larger rocks. It looked empty, but his training told him to be cautious. He motioned for Sullivan to take point while he studied the area through his binoculars. The valley appeared deserted, but Rodriguez noticed something that made his stomach tighten. There were tire tracks in the sand, still relatively fresh. Someone had been here recently, and given the remote location, it wasn't likely to be friendly forces. He signaled the team to spread out and approach carefully. Sullivan moved like a ghost across the sand, his boots finding the firmest ground with practiced ease. Chen and Williams flanked him on either side, maintaining proper spacing to avoid presenting a clustered target. Rodriguez brought up the rear, constantly scanning their 6 o'clock for any signs of pursuit. The first shot came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The crack of a rifle echoed off the surrounding dunes, but none of the SEALs could immediately identify the source. Rodriguez's training kicked in instantly, and he dropped to prone position, signaling his team to do the same. For several seconds they lay motionless, hearts pounding, waiting for additional shots that never came. Sullivan was the first to break the silence. Speaking in barely audible whispers into his throat microphone, he reported no visual contact with any shooters, but confirmed hearing the unmistakable sound of a high-powered rifle. Chen's hand shook slightly as he checked his radio equipment, ensuring they could call for support if needed. Rodriguez studied the terrain with renewed intensity. The shot had sounded close, maybe within 200 meters, but the echo made it impossible to pinpoint exact location. Worse, there were dozens of potential hiding spots among the rocks and larger dunes. An experienced sniper could be anywhere, watching them right now through a scope. Williams, despite his youth, showed remarkable composure as he covered their left flank. His grandfather had been a Marine sniper in Vietnam, and Williams had grown up hearing stories about the patience and skill required for that deadly profession. He knew they were potentially facing someone with similar training and considerably more knowledge of the local terrain. The second shot never came, which worried Rodriguez more than if they had come under sustained fire. A trained sniper would typically fire once to gauge range and wind, then adjust for a killing shot. The fact that no follow-up occurred suggested either the shooter had missed his intended target, or this was some kind of psychological warfare. After 10 minutes of absolute stillness, Rodriguez made the decision to move. Staying in one position too long would make them sitting ducks if the sniper was repositioning for a better angle. He signaled the team to bound forward in pairs, using whatever cover they could find among the scattered rocks. Sullivan and Williams moved first, sprinting 20 meters before diving behind a cluster of boulders. Chen and Rodriguez followed, choosing a different route to avoid establishing a predictable pattern. The desert remained eerily quiet, as if even the wind had stopped to watch this deadly game of hide-and-seek. As they regrouped behind the rocks, Rodriguez noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh cigarette butts lay scattered in the sand, along with the distinctive pattern of combat boots in the dirt. Someone had been using this exact position as an observation post, possibly for hours or even days. The implications hit him immediately. If enemy forces had been watching this area for an extended period, they likely knew about the SEAL patrol before it even began. This could be an ambush, carefully planned and expertly executed. Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. Chen's radio crackled softly with an incoming transmission from their base. Command was requesting a status update, but Rodriguez hesitated to respond. Radio transmissions could be tracked, potentially giving away their exact position to any enemy equipped with the right equipment. He decided to maintain radio silence for now, at least until they had a better understanding of what they were facing. Williams spotted movement on a distant dune, just a brief flash that could have been anything from a person to a piece of debris caught in the wind. He pointed it out to Sullivan, who trained his scope on the area but saw nothing definitive. The uncertainty was becoming as dangerous as any actual threat. Rodriguez knew they had reached a critical decision point. They could retreat and call for backup, effectively abandoning their mission. They could continue forward and risk walking into a carefully prepared trap. Or they could try to locate and neutralize the threat, using their superior training and equipment to turn the tables on whoever was hunting them. The choice would define not only the success of their mission, but potentially determine whether all 4 men made it home alive.